Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be painting up Awlrach the Drowner from Age of Sigmar, I believe the Nighthaunt army? Yes. Oh, basically I looked at my pile of shame and was like, I don't want to paint anything here, this is all boring. So I looked and saw this model and it was cool and it's relatively new. So let's give it a try. Now looking at the box as a guide, we have some clear noticeable things. There's the wood of the ship, there is the skeleton bones, there is the ghosts, which are divided into two colors, a whitish green and a darkish blue in their cloudy smokiness. Then there's the pilot himself, which has a green cape, a reddish brown shirt on. He looks pale white, but there's a mix of green in there, and the metals are essentially a dark metal and brass, and that's essentially the colors. Oh, and the ground is gray. Now, I would like to point out that this model is very intertwined in how it is assembled and built, and so I basically lay all the pieces out in their different sections, essentially the different steps to build the model, and all their pieces here, and from here I can kind of guess what should be assembled and what shouldn't based on the difficulty of how it would be to paint. It can't be fully assembled. If I do fully assemble it, the paint job is going to be very difficult and it's not going to be as good. So this is a good way of like trying to judge and guess how to figure how much you should assemble for ease of painting. And now for final assembly. Essentially the ground is assembled by itself with its one tombstone in it. The center of the ship is assembled with the ghost parts on the bottom. The paddle is alone by itself. The right and left half of the ship is assembled with the bones on the inside. The rib cages that's supposed to be on the front are completely unassembled and separate from everything else. The main ghost, I don't know what they are, the ghosts are separate. The treasure chest and tombstone piece is separate as well, and then the main guy is assembled all the way except for his paddle's not assembled to him. And of course I primed the entire thing with Bright Touch General Purpose Gray Car Primer. And now with Liquitex modeling putty, we're going to apply this onto the base. I kind of want to paint this model up really quickly in a short period of time. I just want to speed run this, and so might as well get this done because it takes like 12 hours overnight to dry. So basically spread this out, and so what I want to do is I kind of want to mimic the base look, and so I put on a thin layer of this, and then I rapidly dry it with a hairdryer, and then I just press another big base that belongs to the orc set to give it a bit of a textured feel and to flatten it. And this worked very well. However, it was a little too thin in the end. I should have applied a slightly thicker coat and then flattened that. That way it would look better with the pre-made base that came with it. Alright, pre-coating, Dawnstone, Pallid Witch Flesh, White Scar White. We're going to use the airbrush. We're going to apply Dawnstone from the bottom and Pallid Witch Flesh from the top, 45-degree angle. Unfortunately, my airbrush wasn't that clear and it got stopped up with the Pallid Witch Flesh when I went to do that, so that actually took me a while to actually get this step done. And then with White Scar White and these Army Painter dry brushes, I just dry brushed the entirety of the model. Worked really well on the wood on these ships. Alright, with Thondia Brown, Lamian Medium, not Pallid Witch Flesh, in the end I didn't use it, and Burnt Umber for an oil wash, I do the wood. It's the largest thing, so just as a general rule, I tend to go for the largest piece of every model first, just to get it out of the way. So we're going to do a wash with Thondia Brown mixed with Lamian Medium, sort of our 1-to-1-ish, mixed with a little bit of water to help it flow better, and we're going to apply this all over. And depending on the thickness, I might have to do 2 coats. I mean, it really depends on how well the wash is made. It's always up in the air. And then once that's done, I'm going to make an oil wash with the Burnt Umber and Mineral Spirits. And ideally you do it in 1, maybe 2. So I did a apply, I then wiped with a sponge to get rid of the majority of it so that it was only in the recesses, and then I applied a second coating of this. And then it just wasn't there. It felt a little dull. Alright, we're going to try to add some color to this. So with this greenish hue, lamp black, and burnt umber, we're going to make some other oil washes. So first, we're going to make the burnt umber brown wash, but we're going to add a little bit of black to it. Just a little. The black oil paint is very, very strong, and it's going to create a much darker wash. And we're going to apply this all over the wood. And maybe around... It depends on how strong it is. You don't have to do 2 coats, maybe just 1 is enough. And then we're going to wipe. Wipe mostly towards the center for lighting. I don't know how to describe it. And then what we're going to do is then we're going to make a green wash. We're going to mix that greenish hue with a little bit of the black. We want a dark green. And then we're going to apply it all on the inside of the wooden ship, as well as the, not the center, but the top and bottom of the outside of the wood ship. Just to make it look like some green mossing or molding or stuff there. Then we're going to take our sponge and we're going to wipe towards like the middle of the boat, and what it's going to do is it's going to blend the green parts of the wash in with the wood better, so there's a better transition of color. Alright, with Screaming Skull, Lamnian Medium, Pallid Witch Flesh, and Burnt Sienna for an oil wash, we're going to paint the bones. Now this is meant to make a more brownish skeleton. So that's what we're going to go for. So, Screaming Skull on all the bones. Just a solid layer. But this is mixed with the Lamnian Medium mix, so it's a wash, so it does all the natural highlighting and everything like that. So, just FYI. And then, once that is done, we're then going to do our oil wash all over. We're going to do light wash, apply, wipe, and then apply again, and maybe a very light wipe on just the most raised areas. And then once that's done, what we're going to do is we're going to take a pure Screaming Skull mixed with a little bit of Pallid Witch Flesh, and we're going to highlight the tips and edges of the bones. The most raised areas for the rib cages that's on the front, we're going to do mostly on the edges of the bones. And just where it looks good, just like the thick edges. And then we're going to add a little bit more Pallid Witch Flesh, and we're going to do a much more finer highlight on the most raised areas and the most raised obvious places on the rib cage and other places like that as a fine highlight. Alright then, with Caliban Green, Lamnian Medium, Pallid Witch Flesh, and Viridian Hue, which is that green color, and Lamp Black for oil washes and paint and stuff, we're going to paint the cloak. The reason why I'm doing the guy's cloak now is because when it comes to holding the model, I want this done now because I'm going to move on to other things, and then this will give it enough time to solidify and dry, making it safer and easier to paint. Alright, so we're going to make a wash with Caliban Green and Lamnian Medium, our usual sort of 1-to-1 with a little bit of water, and apply it all over, and this pretty much turns the cloak into a paint by number. We can easily see where's the shading, the recesses, and such and such. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a dark green paint from the oil paints, and it's not going to be a wash, it's going to be a paint, so a little bit of mineral spirits just to make it flow better, and we're going to apply it all over. Then we're going to use our sponge and we're going to wipe heavily, and it takes a while to wipe it right. We have to go through a bunch of sponges, recycling, or just cutting the sponge to give it a clean layer. And then after a bit, and I let it dry with a hairdryer to heat up because heat rapidly dries oil. I then add more mineral spirits to the dark green paint, turn it into a wash, and then apply that again, and then of course wipe. And then I have a pretty good decent shading. It's cleaned up enough that it doesn't look bad or like blotchy. And so now I go with Caliban green and I mix it with some pallid witch flesh to make a highlight. And then I start highlighting. I paint straight lines along the most raised areas. And then I decide, you know what, I'm going to try something. I'm going to make it a bit different. So I'm going to get a very fine tip brush and I'm just going to paint straight lines throughout the entire thing, from going up and down, vertical lines, to sort of add something to the cloak, even in the recesses. I just wanted to try it. And then I mixed some more pallid witch flesh with Caliban green, and then I highlighted the most raised, most prominent areas and edges of the cloak. And it actually turned out well. I think the lines sort of added something to it, even though it makes no sense. It actually kind of looks good. Alright, continuing on with Lamp Black and Viridian Hue mix, and as well as, I don't show it, but Pallid Witch Flesh. So we're going to work on these ghosts. So what we're going to do is we're going to have two washes made, one of just pure Viridian Hue, and one mixed with the Lamp Black. And so we're going to paint the top part of the ghosts with the lighter color, and then wipe. Unfortunately I waited a little too long and it kind of kicked on. And then we're going to use the darker one on the bottom half of the spectral ghost cloud things, and then wipe. Then after that dries a bit, I then, after trying to wipe, I then dry brush with Pallid Witch Flesh all over again to add like the highlights. And then I used a thinner version of the washes and reapplied those again. A bit mixed with the result. It should have been a bit brighter, whiter, but eh. And then also the Awlrach, or the main guy, as I assume he is, I then give him like, so his skin, he has one arm on the oar and one on his right arm and his face. I basically applied the Viridian Hue wash. I then, I don't wipe, I apply, and then I use a paintbrush. I don't show it, but I paint the edges of his body with Pallid Witch Flesh. Then I apply again, and then I apply another further highlight with Pallid Witch Flesh onto like his knuckles or stuff like that, or the lines of his muscles and his face as well. Alright, with Doombull Brown, Lamine Medium, Pallid Witch Flesh, and Burnt Umber for an oil wash, we're going to, paint up the brown coat on the guy. So I use a wash of Doombull Brown mixed with Lamine Medium, the usual, with a little bit of water to make it flow better, and apply it all over. I then apply a wash of Burnt Umber with a little bit of the black mixed in. I forgot to show that, and it created a very dark brown. And I applied it, and then I would wipe it off. And then I decided to take Doombull Brown with a little bit of Pallid Witch Flesh and use it for highlights. Now, Doombull Brown, when lightened with Pallid Witch Flesh, does not turn into a brighter brown, it turns into a pinker brown. So, after highlighting and edging it, I then decided to do the stitching thing again, but this time instead of going vertically, I did horizontal to sort of clash with the bottom cloak he has. And so I applied these stitches everywhere. I don't know, it kind of adds a little bit of character. And then I added Doombull Brown mixed with more Pallid Witch Flesh as a much finer highlight on the most raised areas and edges of his cloak. And then it was too pink. So I applied like a couple washes of the Burnt Umber, just pure Burnt Umber oil wash on, like 2 or 3, and then maybe a little bit of a wipe on the most raised areas just to make it shine a little bit. And that's about it. Alright, now for the base with Dawnstone, Administrative Grey, Burnt Umber, French Ultramarine, and I didn't use the Viridian Hue. By the time I got to that point I was like, nah, the base looks good enough, I don't want to add it. So basically I painted the whole base with Dawnstone, despite all the pre-setup I did on it. And then I dry brushed it with Administrative Grey all over with the Army Painter dry brushes. Then I applied a Burnt Umber wash, which I made too much for, and so I lost some. Apply this all over, and because of the texturing I did, it looked like the outer areas were pretty good too, but the pre-made part of the base that comes with Awlrach kind of stood out a bit too much. And then I applied, like, how do I put this? I loaded up the brush with the French Ultramarine wash, and I just like slapped it onto the stones, every stone, and it applied a bit there, and it blended in well, and it turned the stones to a grayish, bluish, brownish. It worked pretty well, and I was like, I don't need to add the green. Alright, with Uriel Yellow, Orc Flesh, and Lamine Medium, we're just going to knock out that flame. So up top he has this little light bulb flame, so I'm going to add Uriel Yellow all over, make sure it's a solid coat. Then I'm going to take Orc Flesh and dilute it a lot with Lamine Medium, and then basically what we're going to do is just going to apply layer and layer at it. We're going to apply a layer pretty much over covering almost the entire thing except inside the lamppost, and then we're going to apply another layer further down, and then further down, and then further down. So basically it goes from yellow to fading to green to full green. And also at the very end I apply this onto Awlrach's hair to make it stand out or be like stronger compared to his skin. Alright, with Elysian Green, Pallid Witch Flesh, Gene Sealer Purple, and Magenta, I'm going to paint his ore, the details. So we're going to start off with Elysian Green and paint the vine that's going all throughout it. Then I'm going to mix the Elysian Green with a little bit of Pallid Witch Flesh, lighten it, and then I'm just going to paint like a solid line on the vine that's furthest away from the ore, raised up, basically. Then we're going to take Gene Sealer Purple and paint all those flowers. Then we're going to do is we're going to take a simple magenta wash paste, not really a wash, closer to a paint, and paint all the flowers in it. And then we're going to wipe. And yeah, it kind of scud a little bit of the paint off. So then what I do is like, you know what, I'm just going to take Gene Sealer Purple mixed with a little bit of Pallid Witch Flesh and do an overbrush on the tips of the roses. And it looked good. And then with AK Interactive Ultra Matte Varnish, I applied this to everything I have painted so far. The non-metallics are, as best as I can tell, done. Alright, now for the metals. So with Liquitex Gloss Varnish, Runefang Steel, Carbon Black, and this transparent raw sienna. So essentially we're going to make a dark metallic brass. So with Runefang Steel mixed with the Gloss Varnish to help it shine, because the inks will take away its shine, we add a very, very small amount, not even a full drop of the black ink into it, and then we add a full drop of the transparent raw sienna, because this will add like a coppery color to it. Make sure you add enough gloss varnish, because if not, it'll look really dull and bad, the metallic finish. And so we then apply this to basically almost all the metal, the chains and everything, the ore, chains that he has on him, and such and such. And then once we're 100% sure we've added it to all the metal, then we then add some transparent burnt sienna, a much darker brownish kind of color added in, and it creates this copper color. And so we're going to apply this all over the parts that we just want it to be copper as well. And then I fully assemble the model, which takes a bit of time, but it's actually pretty simple to do, surprisingly, after all the paint, because normally when you paint a lot and then you try to assemble, sometimes the pieces just don't fit together because the paint has caked it on. And yeah, it turned out pretty well. And done. Well, there are a few small details I didn't mention, like the treasure chest, it's just painted like the medals. The gold coins, I just took a basic Liberator gold just to paint them so they would stand out more. Took a few more coats with the metal paint than I would want, but overall, the simple, easy project. Overall, it was a bit tedious overall to plan because of how intertwined the model is with each other. I really had to have everything really separate and to be able to paint it properly, but it assembled very well. The base, it's sort of a partial win, partial fail. The paste should have been thicker, and so that the pre-made base that the character came with would sink into it. Instead, now it looks like it's noticeably higher up, which isn't that good in appearance, but the texture that the flat base got really kind of works with the rest. And apart from that, the ghosts are so-so. They should have been the whiter should have been more obvious. Maybe I should have dry brushed them a second time with powdered witch flesh on the more raised areas. But he himself, his character, the stitching on his cloaks and stuff really does stand out and makes it look a bit more interesting and better. The wood on his ship is incredible. It came out unbelievably well. All the details, every single board, it's clear and obvious. The bones, the rib cages that are in the front and inside the ship, it's a different color. It's not like the usual brown I do, a darker brown. This is more of like a reddish brown for bone. It's okay. It's nothing wrong with it. It's just maybe not the colors I would like, but it's something different. The metals came out pretty well after figuring out some kinks in the mix. And yeah, overall it's a pretty good project. It's not a 10. It might be an 8, but the stitching stuff really brings it out, and the colors are really nice, and the overall appearance is nice. I don't know, maybe it's just because the model is really cool. You know what, this could have been a 9, but the super flat of the base kind of the paste Liquitex modeling putty on the base is a little too flat, and so it kind of takes away from the base. And so if I got that right, it could easily have been a 9 out of 10, but I'm going to say it's an 8 out of 10, just barely 9 out of 10 for my work. It's not like, for just those know, 10 out of 10 doesn't mean I consider myself gold demon level. I mean 10 out of 10 for what I could possibly do. A 10 out of 10 would be me going above and beyond, finding a new way, making the model incredible for my own ability. So for the best of my ability, this is an 8 out of 10. This could have been a 9 out of 10 if the base turned out better. And yeah, and also a 10 out of 10 would take a ridiculous amount of time and effort to really plan out and get done. So it's more like if I had another 2 weeks on this, I could probably make it a 10 out of 10, but nope. So 8 out of 10, learned some lesson. This was really a speed painting. I really pushed this one out, even though when this video is released, it's not going to look like that. That's because I took several days off to just do nothing. To relax, I guess you could say. And so this one was done very quickly, and so this was more of me so when I paint, I actually second guess myself a lot. For every single decision, I probably second guess myself 3 or 4 times. So this was more like I just get paint on the model and I'll live with it and learn. And it came out pretty quick, and overall the decisions may not have been the best, but I rolled with the punches and made the most out of them, and it looks good. Yeah. Alright, like the video if you like the video, comment if you want to comment, share it if you want to share it, and I'll see you soon. Ish. Maybe. Bye.